What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome back to another episode of the NBA Talk podcast for the week of March the 14th, 2017, all the way to March the 21st, 2017. I'm your host, Hani, and on this episode of the podcast, we're going to be covering our main story for this week is the New York Knicks are still going to trade Carmelo Anthony this offseason. It was kind of funny about this. This actually came up now. We're actually filming this pretty late, but I'm actually glad I filmed this podcast a little bit late, otherwise I wouldn't be able to catch this story. So the New York Knicks are still going to plan on trading Carmelo Anthony this offseason. Along with that, we also have the NBA and how they're not happy that the Cavs' Big Three skipped another nationally televised game. So we're going to get into that, why that's such a big issue right now, and what I feel about it in general. We're also going to be talking about how James Dolan's associates are pushing him to ditch Phil Jackson. We're also going to be talking about how Alvin Gentry is likely to be fired unless the Pelicans show some progress. Along with that, we also have the Celtics are planning a reunion for the 10th anniversary of them winning the 2008 title, except without Ray Allen. So we're going to get into that as well. And finally, we're going to talk about how the Timberwolves have signed free agent Omri Casspi for the rest of the season. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the Knicks remain committed to moving Carmelo this summer. I mentioned that this story literally popped up today. Like today I'm filming this on March the 22nd right now. So the news broke today that this is actually happening. So yeah, the New York Knicks will continue their dogged push to shove Carmelo Anthony out the door in favor of a rebuild. Anthony holds all the power with a full no-trade clause, but that hasn't deterred the Knicks president Phil Jackson having failed to move Anthony at the trade deadline. The Knicks will continue looking for suitors in the offseason, sources told ESPN's Ian Begley. The Los Angeles Clippers could emerge as a suitor. A deadline deal didn't quite pan out, as the Knicks were offered scraps. But Begley relays that members of the Clippers organization were confident that a deal could be made in the summer. Los Angeles is facing a key free agency decision with Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, and JJ Redick all due for new contracts. It's unclear as to how Anthony would fit into their plan since their payroll is set to skyrocket. But before anything else, the decision rests upon Anthony's shoulders, so long as he's willing to endure the media scrutiny and endless losing that comes with wearing the Knicks uniform. The team has no choice but to honor his contract. So basically, we all know the Knicks wanted to trade Carmelo Anthony at the trade deadline. They wanted to get rid of Carmelo Anthony to properly start a rebuild, and they tried the trade deadline. But we all know Phil Jackson and his work with the New York Knicks, and clearly he was not able to come up with a trade at the deadline that can A, satisfy Carmelo Anthony, and B, satisfy other teams involved. So now he is still determined to trade Carmelo Anthony and start a proper rebuild, which he can only do so in the offseason now. He can't trade Melo now. He has to wait till the offseason. So now it's really about Phil Jackson trading Melo. He has to trade Melo, in my opinion. I think it's best for the Knicks and Melo to part ways. I've said this before in other episodes that, and it's kind of amazing me how many times I talk about Carmelo Anthony, but he's been a big topic this year. He's had a lot of media around him, and we're talking about Carmelo because we don't know what's his future. And I don't think he knows. But I think it's best for the Knicks and Melo to part ways because, for the Knicks, Melo is clearly blocking them from properly rebuilding because he's owed a lot of money, and that money, if it's off the Knicks' payroll, can be used to sign better free agents, to allow the Knicks to have more cap room, more cap flexibility in the future, which is something that they haven't been able to do so far with Carmelo on the roster. So getting rid of him would also solidify that this is Porzingis' team, so they can build around a younger team, a younger core, and hopefully develop for the future. And along with that, I think Melo's thing in New York isn't good for him because They're not winning. The Knicks are not winning. And I think Melo, who is, I believe, 31 or 32 years old at this point, is looking near the end of his career now. And this guy, as talented as he is, has never been, I think, past the first or second round in the playoffs. Has only appeared once in the playoffs. And, has never competed for a championship, which is something that he's always wanted to do. He's always wanted to compete for a championship. That's the whole reason why he came to New York, to compete for a championship, because he thought he can do it there. But clearly things didn't pan out like that. So I think it's best that, Melo and the Knicks just leave, just part ways with each other. I think, I think he should, man. But the problem is that Melo has his no trade clause, which means that he ultimately can decide where he wants to go. He has all the control, which I think was stupid on the Knicks at the time to give him that no trade clause, because now all the power is in Melo's hands, which means that as an organization, the Knicks are kind of handcuffed to Melo. So like, if Melo decides to stay, they're stuck with him. They can't get rid of him. They have to honor his contract, and they have to suffer for another couple years with Melo on the roster. So that's where the problem really lies. And Melo's made it abundantly clear. He loves it in New York, which again, I really just don't understand. Why does Melo persistently want to stay in New York? I mean, I get New York's a big city, a lot of media, and I get it's been your home for the last 5 years. But come on, bro. Seriously. Like, any NBA player, their goal is to win a championship. And Melo, at the stage of his career right now, that's the one thing he hasn't done. It's the one thing he's never achieved. It's the one thing that will probably elude him for his career, that he's never won a championship. Now, I know there's other great players like Barkley and others, among others, who've never won a championship, but they at least competed for a championship. They at least were, in the position to win. Melo has never been in a position to win a championship, which means that he's actually below those guys, in my eyes, especially, because he didn't even compete. So I don't understand. Why do you want to stay on a losing team when you know that you are the reason, you have the ability to go wherever you want to win a championship? Why are you choosing to stay on this shit team and endure this bad publicity, endure this constant losses, endure wasted years of your life, wasted years of your career? Is that really something you want to do, Melo? Like, that's really where I don't understand that. Now personally, I think Melo should be moved. I think really the Knicks have to get rid of Melo. Now, where he should be going, that is the biggest question here. Because now, the thing about this deal, I think the best scenario, the Knicks have to look for the best scenario here. They need to look for a scenario where A, Carmelo is going to be going to a championship contending team, and B, the Knicks can get a proper return back, so that they are getting exactly what they need, which are young assets and draft picks for the future. They don't want to do what the Brooklyn Nets did and just get nothing in return. So for me personally, I think for Melo and the Knicks, the best destination is Boston. I think the Boston Celtics are the best destination, because Melo will be joining a pretty solid roster, very well coached. He's joining a fellow All-Star in Isaiah Thomas and Al Horford, so that can be a new big three there. I think Melo can buy into that system. I think Melo can be happier in Boston. I think, it's a better situation with Melo, and plus he can stay in the Eastern Conference. This is why I don't like him going to the Clippers, because the Clippers are still in the West. There's still teams like the Spurs and the Warriors and maybe even the Rockets, and those teams are really good, and I don't think Melo has a chance of winning there. I think Melo has a better chance of winning in the Eastern Conference in Boston, because Boston has already built a very solid roster, and I think adding Melo to that can bolster that even further. Along with that, this also checks the other box. That means the Knicks are getting a solid return back, because one of the things the Celtics have done is they stockpiled many young players and draft picks that potentially they can trade away in a blockbuster move. And let's not forget, they still have the potential number one overall pick in this year's draft. If the Knicks can somehow convince Boston to give them that pick, you know how great that will be for the Knicks, because the Knicks will not only have their first round pick, which is in the lottery for sure, and then they're also gonna have the number one overall pick in an already loaded draft class. Just think about the Knicks getting either Markelle Fultz or Lonzo Ball. Those are franchise changing draft picks right there. And if the Knicks can do that, I think that's the best thing. They get the best return for Carmelo Anthony. I think that's the best exchange. Everybody gets what they want here. But now the whole question really is, do Boston want Carmelo Anthony? Because Carmelo Anthony really just doesn't fit their whole system, I think. I think Melo doesn't play, because Melo isn't the best defender. He isn't a, passing guy. He's really an ISO scorer. That's what Melo is. He is a scorer. A very good one at that, but I don't know if the Celtics will want another scorer, because they already have that in Isaiah Thomas. So that's another thing, because I don't know if the Celtics will be willing to give up, that many assets to the Knicks for Carmelo Anthony. So that is the other question. But I think Boston is the best destination. But if Boston doesn't happen, I think for Melo, I think another option could be the Wizards. The Wizards look like they have a solid foundation right now. They have a Wall and Beal, and then add Melo to that. That's a pretty good big three in my opinion. But it's really confusing, man. It's just really confusing, because the Knicks, with the Wizards, the Knicks may not get a proper return back. So it's really confusing, man. Where would Melo go? Because it's so hard to pinpoint the championship teams, especially with the super teams like the Warriors and the Cavs. Melo's not going to any of those two teams, by the way. I'm squashing that right now. Melo is not going to the Warriors. The Warriors have zero money to pay Melo, so they cannot afford his salary. Neither can the Cleveland Cavaliers. They can't afford his salary either. So those two teams are out of contention. The Spurs, Melo won't fit in with the Spurs, and I don't think the Spurs are a team that will trade for Melo. They may sign Melo as a free agent, but they're never going to trade for Melo, because the Spurs value their assets. So that really just leads a few teams in my mind, and I think it's the Celtics and the Wizards. Those are my two potential destinations for Carmelo Anthony. But overall, man, I think Melo should be traded. I think this is the right thing for Phil Jackson to do if he wants to save his job, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I think that Phil Jackson has this offseason to prove that he can truly build a team. I think if he can trade Carmelo Anthony, get a proper return, and draft a future superstar for the Knicks, I think the Knicks will keep him around. I think he will prove to the fan base that he is worthy of what the money he's receiving. But if he doesn't, then I don't know, man. I think bad things are going to be happening for the Knicks. But we'll see what happens, and I'm really hoping that Melo can finally, compete for a championship, and the Knicks can finally just start off fresh. Moving on. According to David Griffin, the NBA not happy that Cavs sat Big 3 versus the Clippers. The NBA is not happy with the Cleveland Cavaliers' decision to sit their Big 3 against the Los Angeles Clippers. Cavaliers general manager David Griffin said he heard from the league shortly after Cleveland announced that LeBron James, Kevin Love, and Kyrie Irving would not be playing in Saturday's contest, adding that the NBA made it abundantly clear that they were less than thrilled with the team's decision. 7 minutes after it was announced, Griffin told ESPN's Ramona Shelburne, they were not happy. While Griffin understands the league's frustrations, he notes that LeBron was the only player who was truly healthy, as Love and Irving were both nursing injuries. I feel bad for the league, Griffin says. I really do, but it is what it is for us from an injury standpoint. We literally had one guy rest tonight, and everybody else was reasonably injured. I don't feel like we did anything terribly egregious, he added. Commissioner Adam Silver has previously stated that he'd prefer that teams rest their stars at home, sympathizing with fans who spend hundreds of dollars to see their favorite players from opposing teams. The Cavaliers unsurprisingly struggled without their star trio on Saturday, falling 108-78 to the Clippers. So basically, on Saturday, there was going to be a primetime matchup between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Los Angeles Clippers. It was supposed to be a great matchup, pitting the two of the NBA's best teams against each other. And it turned out to be a showcase of the Cavaliers' bench unit. Because LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love all did not play in that game due to rest. And this is creating a lot of problems in the NBA, as the NBA is not happy that they're doing this. And this issue of resting players is getting worse and worse by the season. You see the Warriors do it against the Spurs. You see, you've seen other teams do this as well, where they just rest their stars in December and other months. And the NBA is just not happy about this, and it's for a few reasons. First of all, I think this is a bad look for the NBA, as this is an insult to the fans. I really think this is an insult to the fans, as they purchased their tickets. They purchased their tickets to see their favorite players play, and they were expecting to see a great matchup, especially people who paid money, good money. That game was at the Staples Center, so they paid good money to be in that game, to witness the Cavs face the Clippers. They wanted to see a great matchup, but instead, they find out after they bought their tickets, after they were prepared to go, that the three stars aren't even going to play. I mean, like, what the hell is that? It wastes not only the fans' time, you waste their money, and you waste their interest in the NBA. Like, I don't get it. I think fans should be pissed at this. I think the fans should be annoyed that it shows that players don't care about the fans. They care more about winning championships, and which is a shame, because basketball is only a major sport because fans enjoy watching the game. So without the fans, the players wouldn't really have anything to play for and make their money, because the fans are the viewers, and the viewers make the money for the NBA. So I don't understand why you have to rest, especially on a big game like that. Like, for me, my concern really came that, the Cavs are resting on a primetime game against the Clippers. Like, why would you choose that game? Why couldn't you rest the night after against the Lakers? Because they played in the same building the next night against the Lakers. Like, why would you play on that night where nobody really cares after that? Because you're playing the shitty Lakers. And why didn't you play the, consensus better Clippers? I mean, like, you're basically just giving a whole slap into the face for the fans, because they paid their money to see that game. So I just think this is a bad look for the NBA. It really insults the fans, as they aren't getting anything out of this. I also think this is bad for the business of the NBA, because this was a nationally televised game. This is a game that was broadcast on major networks such as ESPN and ABC, and they pay good money to broadcast these games. Like ABC, TNT, these companies pay money to have NBA games showcased on their prime time slots. So they pay good money in expecting a high return of viewership to their product. But when you find out that the three box office players aren't even going to play in that game, it's like, what the hell? They look at the NBA like, what the hell? We paid you money, so we invested in you, so you guys can give us give us a return on our investment. But we don't get a good return because, your players aren't even playing for us. So fans aren't interested. So now it's bad for that, as it looks bad on the networks. And now they lose viewers, they make less revenue, and which could have an effect on the long-term contracts with the NBA. Maybe if this continues, then I predict that networks will stop making deals in the NBA. And this is bad for the players because remember how Mozgov got $70 million? Well, that can only happen because of the TV deal the NBA signed a few years ago. So without those TV deals, to broadcast games, the NBA isn't making money, which means that players aren't making money. So this is a really bad for the NBA as they are losing. They can lose money off of this, and they're losing fan interest out of this, and it's overall just a bad situation, man. Now I understand why the players would do this. I understand the reasoning behind it. I understand that teams want to win a championship. I understand that. But nights where fans pay to see you on a nationally televised game, you should not skip those games. I really just feel that on those particular nights, players should not skip games. Like, seriously. And I know there are flaws in the schedule that causes players to do this, but you can't skip those games. Those are the most important games in the schedule, I think, because it's the money-making games. Those are the big games. Those are the big matchups that you want to showcase. And at the end of the day, the game is for the fans. Teams may compete within each other, but the overall product is for the fans. And if we're not getting a good product, then why are we going to watch? Why are we going to give you our money? Why are we going to pay to see you when you're not even going to show up? So it's becoming a big problem. Now, to me, the solution to this problem is simple. As the root cause of this problem, I just mentioned it a little, is that players are resting because the season is very taxing on the body, which means there are too many games that is resulting in players getting tired. So the solution is to reduce the season games to around maybe 60, to spread out the schedule, allowing more players to play in every game. I think this is the smartest solution. I've mentioned this in my problems with the NBA video, but I think the NBA season needs to be shorter because players are finding it really gruesome to play through an entire season and to just overall just be healthy. It's really hard for athletes these days to refrain from injury, and I think having an 82 game season is really hurting that. Now I understand that the NBA will make less money, but will lose some money from this, but at the same time, I think the overall product was by the overall product getting better, I think that will help reduce that and sort of make the margin a little bit more feasible, that maybe the loss is a little bit easier to take in for the NBA, But I think this is the solution, man. And overall, man, I just think this is a serious problem. I think this is really bad. I think this was a bad decision for the Cavs to make because, it's a bad look for everybody, man. It's a bad look for the Cavs. It's a bad look for the NBA. It's a bad look for the TV network. And it's just bad for the fans, man. It's bad for everybody, man. And I think this is a serious problem that can grow bigger, man, if the NBA just doesn't solve this soon. And I think they really have to. I think they need to address this issue soon because more and more teams are doing it. And it's just going to get worse season by season. So we'll see what happens with that. Moving on. So James Dolan's associates pushing him to ditch Phil Jackson. Though head coach Jeff Hornacek feels it could be a draw for free agents in the offseason, the incumbent New York Knicks don't seem too fond of the triangle offense. Even opposing teams are apparently expressing their skepticism about the system's viability. The triangle offense, though, isn't going anywhere as long as Phil Jackson is in charge of the Knicks basketball operations department. And unless either he or team owner James Dolan exercise their mutual opt-out clause after the season, Jackson will likely remain at the control until his lucrative contract expires in 2019. The Knicks have compiled a 76-157 record since Jackson took over and installed the triangle, and are about to fall well short of the playoffs for the third year of his 3-year tenure. So despite the fact that Dolan has said he won't exercise his end of the opt-out, some people around him have pushed him in recent months to move on from Jackson. Sources told ESPN's Ian Begley. Those close to Jackson, meanwhile, feel the Zen Master just needs a little bit more time to get the organization back on track, according to Begley. We'll find out this summer when Dolan's patience extends that far. So basically, even James Dolan's associates have had enough with Phil Jackson. They are done with Phil Jackson. They want Dolan to get rid of Phil Jackson as he's hurting the organization. Now, Dolan and Jackson have a mutual opt-out clause, which means that they need to both agree, who's going to opt out. That if Phil should leave. If Phil wants to leave, he can opt out. And if Dolan wants him to leave, Dolan can opt out of that contract. So, in my opinion, I think Phil Jackson should really just leave the New York Knicks. I think he has done more bad than good to this organization. I think he's really hurt the organization. He hasn't done anything to make this team better. And I think he just wasn't qualified for this job. I don't think Phil Jackson is a guy who you can put in a managerial role. I think Phil Jackson is better off on the sideline rather than, in the office. That's just personally my own opinion. I just think Phil Jackson is not qualified to be a general manager or president of basketball operations. So I think he's not qualified. So I think he should leave. I think he should stop hurting this fan base, stop hurting this team, and stop hurting this organization. I think Phil should leave. I think it's time. He hasn't done anything to make the Knicks better. And I think the Knicks should get somebody who's qualified to actually run this team properly. So overall, man, I just think Dolan needs to make the right decision here. I think he needs to realize that Phil Jackson isn't getting this team better. He's getting this team worse. And he needs to get rid of Phil. If that happens, then the Knicks' future will look a lot brighter. But we'll see what happens, man, in the offseason. Moving along here. Alvin Gentry likely to be fired unless the Pelicans show significant progress. The New Orleans Pelicans look primed to make a push for a Western Conference playoff spot after pulling off a blockbuster trade for DeMarcus Cousins in the waning moments of the All-Star weekend. The Pelicans had gotten one of the game's best bigs, a consensus top 15 player, for the price of an underwhelming prospect, a couple of expiring contracts, and the top 3 protected first-round pick. But since Cousins' arrival, the team's been a bit of a mess. Their lack of depth has been exposed. Cousins and Anthony Davis haven't gelled, and the team has struggled mightily to generate points. They rank 29th in offensive efficiency since the break. The Pelicans' playoff hopes are now effectively extinguished, but that does not mean they have nothing to play for in their final 14 games. Head coach Alvin Gentry's ability to show significant progress with his roster as it stands will likely determine whether or not he joins the unemployment line in the spring. Sources told Sean Devaney of Sporting News. General manager Dell Demps' job may also be in jeopardy, but his seat reportedly isn't as warm as Gentry. Therefore, some feeling in the front office of the record being what it is, the writing is on the wall. The sources told Devaney. Might as well make a change in April and start searching, but is that really fair? Can't you give Dell an offseason to get some shooters? Give Alvin some time to remake the offense. They've at least got to give this playoff spot a run that might buy more time. That's sort of where it stands. Cousins also becomes a free agent after the 2017-18 season, and these remaining 14 games may determine his and the Pelicans' interest in pursuing an extension this offseason. So basically, after acquiring DeMarcus Cousins in a blockbuster trade at the trade deadline, people automatically expected that the Pelicans are going to be a contender for a playoff spot in the Western Conference. However, things haven't gone to plan, as the Pelicans are struggling worse than they were before without Cousins. And it leads to the question, what is wrong with the Pelicans? Why are they struggling so hard? And really, in my opinion, I just think it's the lack of personnel. I think that this article is really just bullshit. I think that the owner of the Pelicans is doing an injustice by putting Dell Demps and Alvin Gentry on the hot seat right now. Because let's be honest here, Alvin Gentry really has nobody to work with to make this roster better besides DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis. And that's really it. The blame can't be placed on Alvin Gentry. There's nobody else on that roster to help, which means it's so hard to win basketball games. As basketball is a team sport, you can't win with 2 guys on the court, And I think the Pelicans don't have that. So I don't think it's Coach Gentry's fault. I don't think it is his fault that he has nobody. There's nobody on the Pelicans roster who can significantly make a contribution, besides Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins, who have been putting up numbers, by the way. They have been both putting up numbers. But again, they can't do it alone. They need a supporting cast. We've seen it with teams like the Warriors. We've seen it with teams like the Cavs. Every star duo, every star player needs a good supporting cast in order to make a star team. So, my solution, therefore, is for the Pelicans to have a big offseason. I think Dell Demps and Alvin Gentry should be at least given 1 to 2 more years to turn this around. At least until DeMarcus Cousins becomes a free agent. I think that you need to give these guys a chance to properly make a roster around their two bigs, make a good roster around them, and get quality pieces and have a full season to integrate Cousins properly. Because I don't think Cousins was properly integrated. I don't think Cousins got the ability to sort of gel with his teammates and sort of get that sort of picture with out Coach Gentry yet. I think Cousins needs some time in order to work that out. So I think they should be given at least another season to work this out. So now it leads to the big offseason. I think they need to have a bigger offseason. I think they need, as they're going to have money, and I think they need to sign quality players, to around this roster. And there's 2 things I think the Pelicans need. First of all, they need a point guard. Drew Holiday, he's a solid player, but I don't think he's going to be in New Orleans after this season. I don't think the Pelicans are going to re-sign him. I don't think they should re-sign him because he's not performing. Right now, he's not performing. People expected Drew Holiday to perform well and to lead the Pelicans, but he's not doing that. And that's a shame because we all expected more out of Drew. So I don't think Drew Holiday's there. So I think they need a backup point guard. A starting point guard on this team. The second thing I think this team needs is shooters to line the perimeter. Because when Cousins and AD bang or down low, they're going to attract the defense. They're going to pull the defense into them. Which means if you want a solid offense, all you need is shooters to line the perimeter. So that if people are doubling Anthony Davis, doubling DeMarcus Cousins, all they would have to do is pass out of the double team and find the open shooters for 3. That will make the offense a lot more efficient. That will make the offense much better. It will overall help the team. Now, as far as some names, I think for the point guard spot, I think there's a lot of names that the Pelicans could look at. I think one guy in particular is Derrick Rose. I think Derrick Rose he is going to be available, but I think you should look at Derrick Rose for the right price. I think Derrick Rose should obviously be on the Pelicans' radar because I think he can thrive with 2 solid big men in the pick and roll. Derrick Rose can handle the ball. He can also attack, and he can also be a contributor on offense. So I think Derrick Rose can be a solid option if he can be brought on to a cheaper price, not a max deal. Because obviously I said Derrick Rose is not worth a max deal. Another guy could be Jeff Teague. There's a bunch of other players who could fill the void that the Pelicans need. All the Pelicans need to do is just go in there and sign these players and build a proper roster around Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins. If they do that, then they're solid. I think they're going to have a great run next year, but I'm really hoping to see that next year. Overall, man, I just think the Pelicans are taking it a little bit too far by threatening Gentry's job. I think he hasn't done anything to warrant that from anyone yet, but I think Gentry really and Dell Demps should really step up their game this offseason and make sure they do what they can because they need to save their jobs at some point if this doesn't go well. Celtics planning 10-year anniversary of 2008 title without Ray Allen. It's been nearly a decade since the Boston Celtics beat the Los Angeles Lakers in the finals, since they hung their 17th banner, since Kevin Garnett tipped back his tears, streaked his face into a sea of confetti, and bellowed the words, "Anything's possible!" Next year will mark the 10-year anniversary of the Celtics' stirring 2008 title, and that team starting point guard Rajon Rondo, who now piles his trade for the Chicago Bulls, is planning a celebratory trip for all his championship teammates with one notable exception. Despite his vital role in the Celtics' lone title of the 21st century and the finals run 2 years later, Ray Allen apparently still hasn't been forgiven for jumping ship to the rival Miami Heat in the summer of 2012, a couple months after the Heat bounced the Celtics from the Eastern Conference Finals. I asked a couple of guys. I got a no head shake. Rondo told the undefeated Marcus J. Spears when asked why Allen hasn't been invited into the celebration. It will be a long story about that, but it is what it is. I don't know a good analogy to put this in. It just wasn't the greatest separation. It wasn't the greatest thing that could have happened to us as a team, a bond. We were at war with the Heat. To go with the enemy, that's unheard of in sports. Kevin Durant. Rondo then seemed to remember what had transpired in Oklahoma City last summer. Well, it's not so unheard of, he corrected. It's damn near common now. With the wound of Kevin Durant's departure still so fresh, he and the Thunder are understandably a long way from reconciliation. But the Celtics have had 5 years to make their peace with Allen's decision. This wound apparently runs deep. The mindset we had, the guys on our team, you wouldn't do anything like that, Rondo said. It makes you question that series in the finals. Who were you for? You didn't bleed green. People think that we had a messed up relationship. It's not the greatest, but it's not just me. I called and reached out to a couple other vets and asked them what they wanted to do with the situation. They told me to stick with what we got without Allen. Rondo said he would have went with the team if the consensus was for Allen to be invited, but as another member of the 2008 Celtics who chose to remain anonymous told Spears, Ray left, he left to the enemy. So this is big news. I mean, next season it will be the 10-year anniversary of the Celtics winning the championship, and it's been 10 years since the Celtics have won a championship in the NBA. So it's been that long for the Boston Celtics when that big three or big four, you can say, was assembled, and that was a fun roster. I missed those Celtics. I missed that team, especially because the Raptors were shit back then. But yeah, I mean, I miss those Celtics. I really do. I enjoyed watching them play. I enjoyed watching a fresh team be in the league. Now, as far as them celebrating, I don't mind them celebrating. I think they have every right to. I think they earned it. And I think Rondo's doing a great gesture. Now, as far as Ray Allen goes, Ray Allen, he left in 2012 to join the Miami Heat, which he eventually won a championship with. I don't know. On one hand, I agree with Rondo saying that, well, I'm one of those old school guys who say, well, you can't just go join the enemy if you're, in war with us. So I think with Rondo's perspective, I understand why they're not inviting Allen, but at the same time, it's been 5 years. You got to forgive the guy at this point. I mean, he's won the championship with you. And I think, really, I don't know really what to do. This is just big news. I don't think Allen should be treated like this. But at the same time, I think Allen did this to himself when he left the Celtics. I mean, who knows? If he stayed on the Celtics, what would have happened? Because remember, I think that if I'm not mistaken, either that or the year after that was the year that Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Jason Terry were all traded to Brooklyn. So even if that was the case, you still had Rondo and Ray Allen on that team. So they could have done something with those two. But he decided to leave and join the Heat, where he won a championship. So I don't know, but this is big news, and we'll see what happens. And finally, guys, the last story for this week: Timberwolves signed Casspi for the rest of the season. The Minnesota Timberwolves have officially signed Omri Casspi for the remainder of the season. The team announced Monday. Casspi has spent time with the Sacramento Kings and New Orleans Pelicans this season, averaging 6.1 points, 4 rebounds, 1.1 assists, and 0.4 steals in 23 games. The 28-year-old was waived by New Orleans late last month after breaking his thumb in his Pelicans debut. Casspi will help strengthen Minnesota's wing depth and should provide spacing for a team that sits just 21st in three-point percentage. I like this signing. I think Casspi is still a great player in the NBA. I think he's someone that could help the Minnesota Timberwolves especially. I think he's a guy that is very underrated. Now, I bash the Kings a lot for how stupid they are as a franchise, but they had some talented players on their roster, and Casspi was one of them. Casspi was very talented, in my opinion, and I think he had the most trade value out of anybody on that team when him and Cousins were still there. So I just think that Caspi's a solid pickup for the Timberwolves, and I think the Timberwolves can really utilize his skill set, especially if he's healthy right now. I think it will be a great signing for the Timberwolves. Anyways, guys, that's it for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Leave this episode a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this channel for more content like this. We upload a basketball podcast every week on YouTube.com. We also have other videos such as, different topics like what's wrong with teams. We also do what-if scenarios. We do predictions. We do things like that. So if you're interested in that, definitely subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Follow me on social media, my Twitter, my Facebook. You guys know what to do. Get all my updates, get all my rage during basketball games. But yeah, anyways, guys, I'm Hani from NBA Talk, and I'll see you all in the next episode of the NBA Talk podcast. Thank you so much for watching.